Um, Welcome, and let me introduce myself first. And my name is Olena Ruth, and I'm with Ruth Tax Law. I just started my sole practice this year, but I practiced in tax resolution for over 10 years. So I love the subject of communication with IRS, and I think during those times it's particularly interesting because of all the delays that not only tax practitioners have, but also the taxpayers. So that's why I decided that this topic would be particularly interesting, just to see what are the negatives with communication with the IRS and what actually positives on their side during the COVID era. So objective, let's do next slide. Our objective today is just to learn from the practitioner's standpoint, what would be solutions and best actions and steps to effectively resolve the issues of our clients. But I think any advices could be applicable even for the taxpayers, because pretty much tax practitioners use the same tools as the taxpayers. So despite the fact that we have most of the negative events in communication with the IRS during COVID era, which mostly it's delayed processing of the paperwork, delays in processing of the tax returns, pretty much a difficulty to get through on the phone with the IRS. There's still some of the positive moments with the IRS and developing of the system and their communication with the taxpayers and tax practitioners. So I will bring those up during the conversation. And one of the first ones, positive, would be the authorization forms that can be e-signed. Let's do next slide. So we as a tax practitioners, we have forms 2848 and forms 8821. It's basically forms that give us authorization to communicate with the IRS and for IRS to disclose to us information. Prior to COVID, the way how we would have to submit authorization forms, and by the way, I need to add that those forms are particularly also useful for people who are representing, let's say, the trusts or their relatives. So it's not exactly not only for IRS for the representatives who work with the IRS. So prior to COVID, we had these forms to be signed personally or with a wet signature by the clients or by the taxpayers, and then submit all the forms by fax. Well, in a way, thanks COVID era, but IRS came up with finally with this the system that we waited for a long time, where we can submit the authorization forms online and with e-signatures. So there are different requirements, a little bit different requirements for e-signatures compared to wet signatures on authorization forms. First of all, the IRS requires that the form is e-signed, so it can be either just a signature, kind of like image of the signature placed on the form. It can be just a signed name of the taxpayer, or any other type. I guess I think that would be the major ones. The next one, the practitioner or the person who actually authorized by this form to communicate with the IRS has to obtain the verification, ID verification from the taxpayer. So the lesson here, if you worked with the client or with the person who you represent prior, you do not have to obtain the ID because you know the person, likely you met the person before. However, if you have a new client, I would highly recommend to obtain just an image of the driver's license, ID, any type of identification, because when you submit the form online, you have to actually basically put a yes mark on when you submit the power of attorney, where you actually say that you verified that this is the person. Now, there is one downside, I think, in a way, to the e-signatures. Oh, we need to go back on the slide. The downside is that if you have e-signed power of attorney, you cannot send it by fax and you cannot mail it. And then the same way it works, you cannot submit the power of attorney online, the power of attorney that was signed in person. With a vet signature. So I'll give you an example. I submitted by mistake one of power of attorney signed by my client, and IRS did not accept it. So after we received the letter of rejection, we had to submit it by fax. Now, and one other positive thing with IRS is that they finally came up with this so-called Tax Pro account. Tax Pro account is for tax practitioners, so persons who represent the taxpayers. What the benefit of it is that, first of all, you can submit power of attorney, so those authorization forms, online for signing by the taxpayer. The downside of this is that, well, I guess the positive is that as soon as the taxpayer or your client signs or e-signs electronically this form, it does not have to be through the processing by IRS. It just literally just gets on the system right away. And if we submit the wet signatures or e-signed power of attorneys by fax or online, it can take right now, I would say, up to 6 weeks. With the power of attorney submitted through the Tax Pro account, it can take literally seconds. Now, the downside of it, the client has to actually register on the website with IRS with a separate account called differently, but sometimes it's just a little bit of hassle. I will be honest with you, I was not able to persuade any of my clients to actually sign up for this system. So I just continue to do it like in an old way through the wet signature and e-signatures. All right, so now we came to our first poll question, and so basically it's true or false to the statement, electronically sign IRS authorization forms can be sent to the COF unit via fax. All right, so we'll give a few more seconds. We've got everybody, and I give you 5 more seconds and I'm ending the poll. All right. Okay, so the answer is actually false. So just a simple rule. If you have authorization form e-signed, it can be submitted only online. If you have wet signature on the form, it can be submitted only by fax or only by mail, which mail I wouldn't recommend because it will take a long time. All right, next slide. Here's the next issue that would be where the IRS actually conflicting with their own rules. So what if you need to call in to IRS, you have submitted your authorization form, but it was not processed yet, again, because it takes 6 weeks for the processing. Usually prior to COVID, you would just fax the power of attorney to the representative. They compare all the signatures, all the information, and they start talking to you and disclosing all the information. Well, what's interesting under the rules of the IRS, which I put it in a slideshow, that's IRM, or Internal Revenue Manual section 21.3.10.3.4, the representative who answers your call is not authorized to accept the e-signed power of attorney. They just by the rules. It's also stated in the instructions to the authorization forms. But what's interesting, despite of this, I don't think I had any representative who wouldn't accept the e-signed form. So that's one of those conflicts when I think IRS came up with the rule, but yet they just believe, possibly just on practice, that it's impractical to it's impractical to not to accept the form that had e-signature via the phone. Again, if it's not processed. Therefore, I would give the tip, if you believe that most likely you would need to contact IRS within about 6 weeks after you were hired and you submitted power of attorney, it would be recommended to get the wet signature on the power of attorney so you can submit that power of attorney over the phone by fax, in case you get the representative who kind of stickler to the rules. All right, so telephone communication during COVID era. We still have practitioner priority service and so-called automated collection system. I gave you the phone numbers, they're pretty much the same. What I would like to note is that practitioner priority service has limited authority related to setting the installment agreements. I do not know why, but basically what they, as of now, the practitioner priority service is limited just to providing the information, such as like transcripts, the status of the case. What I, however, find quite recommended and useful to contact practitioner priority service first, rather than ACS, and ACS would be a collection system, because it's easier to get through to practitioner priority service. And then when they transfer you to collection, to ACS, the transfer actually takes way sooner or shorter time than if you call directly to ACS. Now, that's different times. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but that's what I experienced, and I would recommend you to do that. Now, with respect to ACS, it was back in September, about a month and a half, we had, I participated and presented with the IRS representatives at the ABA conference of the tax section. And IRS basically provided the information that they are in high volume of hiring of their representatives to provide ACS with more support and more stuff. So hopefully we'll have a shorter waiting time, although I wouldn't experience that. So I guess the biggest advice with telephone communication is just have patience. Try to call possibly early morning versus calling during the day, afternoon. That's what I've noticed. It's the easiest time to get in touch with the IRS on the phone system. All right, next slide. I mentioned that practitioner priority line has a limited authority now with respect to actually handling the accounts. It's mostly by they provide the information. Well, I have a new update for you. So if you do not have authorization, but you have access to IRS records, you still will not be able to obtain such invaluable records as account transcripts, wage and income transcripts, that would provide the most of information about your client's accounts. For tax return preparers, wage and income transcripts are very valuable, because then you can prepare the tax returns based on the information that was reported to the IRS. Well, so that's why as soon as we get a new client, I recommend to get the transcripts. Well, if you do not have power of attorney on file, you have to give a call. So practitioner priority service, that would be the service who would provide you with the transcript. The problem before was that you could get only 10 transcripts per call. So you literally, if you need more than 10, you would need to call a couple of times and get those transcripts. Well, just actually yesterday, IRS announced that now tax professionals will be able to order up to 30 transcripts when they call to the practitioner priority service line. I think it's a very good news, and it makes sense, because transcripts are not sent by fax anymore. The IRS basically just placed them in an e-box, and it's easy to pull them out of there. So I think it's a very good news. Otherwise, if you have authorization processed, you can obtain it from your tax practitioner's account on the website. Next slide. All right, and We have a second question, poll question. How many transcripts can a tax professional obtain through the Practitioner Priority Service beginning November 15th? All right, I think we have all the answers. So I give you 5 more seconds. All right, so the majority answered correctly. So now under new rules, it's 30 transcripts that you can obtain when you call the IRS and ask for their records. Okay, so next, that would be communication with field agents and officers. Unlike in a before COVID era, I would say revenue agents, which would be examination, or revenue officers, which would be collection, they were relatively quick on responding to any communication. So if you had any emergency, you could contact them and you would get the call back within about 24 hours. But during COVID era, there is a significant delays. It's really changed. I had a difficulty to contact several revenue officers or to reach out the manager. And I think it's mostly due to the fact that IRS had some of the hiring process even before COVID. And because the agents have to go through the long training, I would say about a year, many of the managers actually left their duty to train some of the groups of the new agents and officers. And of course, short-staffed. Also, revenue officers, revenue agents are not allowed to go to the office unless they have a special permission. Now, that's a little bit different. It would depend on based on the state, but at least in Colorado, I believe majority of revenue officers, not sure about agents, but they work from home. And I think that just slows down the communication. Moreover, there is a big staff rotation, not only because of the training, but I believe many of them actually quit and they just leave. So therefore, the biggest advice, if you have a person, field officer or agent assigned to the case, make sure that you get a contact information of the group manager, because if the officer leaves the post, then at least you have another person to contact and you know who to contact and see whether another person is assigned. All right, next one. And okay, so this one of the biggest one, and in fact, yesterday I read the news. Taxpayer Advocate Service is going to issue the report, and next report will be particularly about correspondence examination. So correspondence examination is more than 70% of the audits conducted by the IRS. It's basically, it's mostly Philadelphia office where examiners sitting there behind the desk. They send out the letters to the taxpayers stating that they need some additional information because they believe some type of adjustments needs to be done to the tax return. The taxpayer or tax practitioner sends out the information, and then usually waiting for about maybe a month or 2 months, and then getting the response from the examination stating that information is accepted or not accepted, and then giving kind of another opportunity sometimes to provide any additional information. Well, with correspondence examination during COVID times, the issue is they're so swamped. So basically the statistics is if before it took the examiner to review the information about 5-7 days when the case basically ends up on their desk, now this time actually increased to 4 weeks. So that's a big difference. But what the issue is, while the examiner reviews the file, the IRS system automatically sends out the so-called statutory notice of deficiency. And statutory notice of deficiency, it's pretty much the final examination notice that gives the taxpayer 90 days to submit, to file the U.S. tax court petition. If the tax court petition is not filed and the taxpayer never heard from the examiner, then the IRS just goes ahead and assesses the tax, regardless of the fact that maybe taxpayer provided all the information about the, I guess not recommended, but proposed changes. So I had many clients that actually came to me with the notice of deficiency and with a question what to do. And my first advice is that submit U.S. tax court petition, regardless of your assumption that you will be successful with providing the information. Even though, and we, at least in 2 cases, we submitted the U.S. tax court petition. And while we were waiting the processing of the petition at the tax court, we actually received the response from examination stating that they accepted the information and the case can be dismissed. However, there are still some cases where examination does not catch up. And the U.S. tax court processes the petition, and we have to have communication with the IRS counsel. So my advice, even though the information is provided to the examiner, file the tax court petition. It's easy to do. The taxpayer can do on their own. Even if you are not attorney, you can help out just to complete the petition. It doesn't have to be very professional. It can be just use the form from the U.S. tax court. But then you know for sure that if examination will not catch up with your client's case, at least you are protecting your client's rights as to the filing the tax court petition and challenging their proposed changes to the tax return. All right, and we switch to a next slide. And we have question number 3. The question is, taxpayers should file the U.S. tax court petition in response to the statutory notice of deficiency, even if they timely responded to a correspondence audit request. True or false? All right, so I'm very happy with the poll. Everybody answered it's 100% correctly. So yes, file the tax court petition. So how do you file the tax court petition? If the total liability is up to $50,000, and that would be including penalties, but not including interest, I would say file the small case petition with the tax court. It's easier to file. It's the small case trials are held in about 15 more cities. So that means that it's most likely that your client's petition will be reviewed quicker than if you submit it as a regular case. And also what I like about the small cases is that pre-trial and trial procedures are less formal. So usually they are handled by IRS counsels directly rather than just sending the case to the appeals. Sometimes it's handled by, well, not sometimes, I would say more often by paralegals. And it's just easier to get in touch with them. And I will tell you, particularly like I mostly work with Denver office. It's easy to communicate. I know they have the same team, and it just, the process is getting quicker. So now how to file the small case procedure. When you file it on paper, there's actually a specific check mark where you put that I want this case to be filed. The petition is a small case. Or if you do it online, there's also check mark. So it's relatively easy. You just check mark it. Just make sure that the liability at issue is under $50,000 with penalties, but no interest. Okay, next slide. So filing the U.S. tax court petition, there's one more positive in the working out on the one positive thing that was happening during the COVID time. The U.S. Tax Court finally created this system, the filing and case management system called Dawson, where you actually can file the tax court petition online. Sounds really strange, but up to a few months, I believe that Dawson started its program at the beginning of 2021, but up until then, the tax court petition could be filed only by mail. So you would literally have to run into the U.S. Post Office and post it, even though all other pleadings could be submitted online. So I would say Dawson's system is great. I personally filed all my petitions for my clients just on Dawson. And if there are any issues, and I'm pretty much, I will tell you, you will have some, just because it's a new system, the personnel answers really quickly. So I would highly recommend that. Moreover, you can make a payment with a credit card, the payment of the filing fee, which is $60. And it's easy, it shows up, you know that it's already, you know, when the case is processed. Now, even if you use electronically versus mail, there's still a huge delay with processing the petitions by U.S. Tax Court. Right now, it's around 1 month. So the petition that we filed somewhere in September, I just got it processed by the U.S. Tax Court. So expect quite a bit of delays. If before I could say that just filing of the answer by the Irs counsel could take just a few weeks, now it takes way longer time. But think about it. Maybe it could be part of your strategy. So if you've got examination, correspondence examination, and you're waiting for a response from them, maybe it's even in a way positive that you will not get into communication with Irs counsel, but while you're in this waiting mode, you will get the response from the examination correspondence and correspondence examination, and then you just contact Irs counsel and dismiss the case. So that's some positives, some negatives, but you still can file the U.S. Tax Court petition on the paper if you would like to do so. All right, let's see. And we go to the next slide. And we have a next question, our poll question. All right, so the taxpayers can file the U.S. Tax Court petition by mail, online, either A or B, none of the above. All right, I give just a few more seconds and I will end the poll. All right, and majority answered correctly. So you can file the U.S. Tax Court petition by mail or online. You cannot do it both, that's for sure. But I would still recommend to do it online. But again, it all depends on your preferences and how old-fashioned and old school you are, because I know many attorneys still like to do it on paper. They feel it's like secure and safe. So you never know. All right, so continuing from the filing U.S. Tax Court petition. So when the IRS issues this final examination notice, the statutory notice of deficiency, giving the taxpayer to submit giving 90 days to submit the U.S. Tax Court petition, and if the taxpayer or attorney representative filed the U.S. Tax Court petition, the IRS collection cannot assess any tax liability that is at issue. Basically, the tax liability that was included on the U.S. Tax Court petition. Well, that's not always happens, and that's what I've noticed. That's where IRS fails a lot. So even though you filed the U.S. Tax Court petition, then the client can receive the notice in a month stating that you owe so much, even though the client knows that there's U.S. Tax Court petition and we are waiting for a response from Irs counsel or we are in communication. So usually prior to COVID, I would get in touch with Irs counsel And I would just explain that this assessment needs to be removed, and they remove it relatively quickly. But considering the fact that there is such delay with U.S. tax court just processing the petition, sometimes you maybe even don't know whether IRS counsel, whose IRS counsel assigned to the case. So finally, IRS realized this issue, because before you would have to call the IRS and say, look, I filed the U.S. tax court petition. You had no right, no legal right to assess the tax that right now is challenged at the court. Well, even your proposal to submit the copy of the petition to the person who is on the phone wouldn't work. They would just say, no, there's an assessment and we cannot do anything, just communicate with IRS counsel. So finally, IRS kind of admitted that this is a big issue, because as soon as the assessment is done, the IRS can start the collection, even to the point of levies and seizures. So the IRS provided this email address to which you can, as a practitioner or taxpayer, email with your information, social security number, the year involved, the tax liability involved, and basically request the assessment to be removed, because the case, if the case is with the U.S. tax court. So it's very important to have this email. I didn't use it personally because I was lucky enough just to have IRS counsel by that time assigned to the case. But I would definitely use it if there is an assessment, because it's just more difficult. It's difficult to remove it. So that's where we are. All right, next slide. Taxpayer Advocate Service. We know that taxpayer, oh, wait, go, give me 1 second. And, oh, no, I don't have a question. So Taxpayer Advocate Service, significant delays. If before they would give the follow-up with you, so basically this is a service independent from IRS. So if you have issues with resolving some problem, some matter directly with IRS due to delays, due to misunderstanding of the IRS, or just basically rejection to listen to you, you can actually submit the Form 911 to the Taxpayer Advocate Service, who is an independent organization, independent from IRS, yet they still have all the direct contact with the IRS, and they can advocate for you. And even tax practitioners are using the service when you just feel like you get nowhere. Well, unfortunately, because of all the existing delays with the IRS, majority of the clients actually, and mostly it's pro se taxpayers, not the clients, but taxpayers, they seek the help from Taxpayer Advocate Service, and as a result, they're incredibly overwhelmed with work. So if before I could hear from them within about 4-6 weeks, now it's literally 4 months. So I would highly recommend to try to resolve the issue by yourself, going through different channels that you know as a tax practitioner, or even as a taxpayer, trying to contact different people if you want your issue, resolved quicker. The benefit filing the Form 911, asking for the Taxpayer Advocate Service to help you, would be if you want to place a collection hold on the case. So if you believe that there will be levies or seizures on your taxpayers' accounts, and you just cannot get any type of a collection hold or help from IRS, then it would make sense to reach out to Taxpayer Advocate Service, get that hold, get the case assigned, but then still continue working with the IRS, even though there's Taxpayer Advocate Service involved, where it's possible, because in some of the channels they will not talk to you. So that's where we are. Okay, so next slide. And it will be so let's see, we've got Irs Passport Program. So I've noticed that many of my clients, particularly right now, think about it, it's holidays, everybody wants to go to Mexico, they want to go somewhere where it's warm, and then they realize that they don't have a U.S. passport. Well, they submit their application for renewal of U.S. passport or application to get the U.S. passport, and then they get a rejection letter basically stating that you owe significant amount of their tax debt, and therefore the IRS certified your debt, meaning that IRS sent out the letter stating that you owe the debt, and we are not going to issue you U.S. passport until you actually resolve the debt. So this is the so-called program, U.S. Passport Program, and the term is certification. So if the taxpayer owes more than $51,000, then the IRS certifies the debt by sending the letter to the Department of State. And if you ask for the U.S. passport renewal or application, they will deny until you resolve the debt. And resolution of the debt, it would be setting up a payment plan, submitting an appeals request, getting currently non-collectible status. So basically some type of resolution, or even paying it in full. Well, so many people just do not, I guess our clients, they do not realize, even they receive a letter stating that we can, and IRS actually have even authorization to, after certification, to revoke the U.S. passport. Now, does it happen often? No, but it's possible. So I recommend when you have a new client is just to have the questions whether they plan any trips overseas, whether they have U.S. passport and they're going to apply for the U.S. passport, or they need to renew it. I guess not only old client, not only new client, old clients as well. So at least you know that there is an urgency, that they're going to apply for the U.S. passport, they need to go, but we know that they will get a rejection. So I will give an example. I had one client, he planned his trip to Greece. He actually applied to renew his U.S. passport, and he got a rejection letter. We didn't have any installment agreement at that time, and he literally had like 2 weeks to get things done, to get his passport, otherwise he wouldn't be able to travel. Well, that's where it comes to section of Internal Revenue Manual 519.25.10.1 that actually provides the expedited decertification. The provisions are relatively simple. It's basically you need get the resolution. So most of the time it's payment plan, but what is important is that you have to request specifically the IRS representative with whom you obtained that resolution that you need the expedited decertification. Now, the regular decertification takes 30 days. Expedited, I would say during these times, maybe 1 week. I believe even the Internal Revenue Manual sets up about 5-7 days. But when you request the expedited decertification, you also need to obtain from your client the confirmation that they are going to travel in the next 2 weeks. So in my case, what I've got is just print out the confirmation of their flight, the date of the flight, and our successful story was we requested decertification, and I encouraged my client to schedule an appointment, not to wait the response from the I guess from the department and to get the U.S. passport, but actually to make the appointment in person. He went into the office and he got decertification letter, actually the office, right on that day, like early morning. Now and that's kind of anecdotal story, but basically my recommendation to my client was just get the confirmation of an installment agreement, because that would be a confirmation of the resolution of the case, even though we didn't have the certification letter. Well, per his communication with the person at the department, I guess the local department where they give the US passports, it was that they have to have a formal decertification letter. And apparently in our case, that letter was communicated from IRS via online to the system. So he successfully flew the next day to Greece and came back very relaxed and happy because he had an installment agreement and he had the decertification and passport and nice trip to Greece. So there's will be, as a follow-up, poll question, and I'm launching it right now, and basically it's true or false. IRS will not expedite US passport decertification. All right, I give 5 more seconds. And I'm ending the poll. And majority responded correctly. So yes, there is a procedure of expedited decertification, and I highly encourage you to use it, but make sure that you actually request when you speak to IRS representative, when you set up this payment plan or other collection alternative. All right, next slide. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. And I believe you can just use a chat box on the Zoom and just type it in. Or if you do not have any questions, but something popped up, I included my contact information. So feel free to give me a call or send me an email. All right, we don't have any questions. So I guess we'll just conclude.
Hi, Olena.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, so a few months ago, I did have a need to make calls to the practitioner priority line. And I would say more than 90% of the time, I would get a message back saying, due to high call volume, we can't take your call right now. Do you think that's improved in recent weeks, the call success rate to the practitioner priority line?
I love your question. I think it didn't.
Oh.
Even though when during ABA conference, the IRS representative stated that they hired over a few thousand people. No, I don't think it improved. I always, when I call practitioner priority line, I always keep fingers crossed and hope that, and I hope you had the same thing, where they offer you to leave your phone number and they will call you back. And I love it because you're not being on hold, and if they say they will call you in 24 minutes, they will. Now, my question to IRS was during ABA conference is, well, sometimes there is such option. Leave your phone number and we will call you back. Sometimes they just basically say, we're too overwhelmed, so please call back next day, which is, I think it's in a way kind of ridiculous, because if you have a deadline, how can you call next day? Well, the IRS explanation was as follows. The system actually figures out how many representatives right now online, I guess, on the call. And if they see that there are too many of the callers, so the system just doesn't allow you to leave the phone number. I've noticed I have one trick. It doesn't work all the time. So if you call practitioner priority line and you basically have the response that, no, we cannot take your call back later, I still call a couple of times, maybe once or twice, and surprisingly, I can get still a person. So I don't know whether it's just a kind of system glitches, they kind of won't get rid of you on the first call. But again, going back to your question, I didn't see any improvement, unfortunately. And I'm not sure whether we should expect soon any. I don't think we will, because we right now in the time of the assessments, after all the tax returns filed in October, now assessments will come November, December. So we will have, I think, even worse situation.
Thank you. I had gotten to the point where I was actually just submitting written replies to notices, which took a lot longer than making a phone call just because I couldn't get through. So it was pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I tell you, before I would send way more correspondence to the IRS, like written correspondence. I'm trying not to do it if I have a deadline. But I would agree with you, particularly strategically, sometimes you would prefer to submit written correspondence versus just over the phone. So,
right.
Yeah, it all depends. So,
Thank
well,
you.
I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one who has this frustration, but I'm sure there's thousands of tax practitioners that have this issue.
No, I've been calling to the practitioner priority line over the past 5 years or so, and this was historically far worse than any other period of time.
Olena, there is a question in the chat.
Oh, what is the website? Okay, so one question is, what is the website to petition with the tax court? Okay, the system calls Dawson, and I will drop the website right here, the link into the chat. So we'll have that one. Actually, it's quite interesting. I was not sure why they call it Dawson. Apparently, there was actually a person. It's by name of one of the practitioners. I believe there's like a history on the website. All right, there is a link, and I don't know how difficult. So the Dawson actually, which is good. It's not only for practitioners. It's only for it's also for taxpayers. And what I've learned, you can register for and taxpayer, and you as a practitioner both can see the same information. So not all my clients would like to see, but that's what it is. Yeah.
I have a question. I think I was reading somewhere where that the IRS was setting up webinars or Zoom meetings to be able to meet with companies or practitioners, or I think it was companies, but are they doing the same for practitioners to be able to set up an appointments virtual appointments?
I never heard of that, like, you know, to have an appointment, I guess, one-on-one, but IRS has a so-called tax practitioner liaison meetings. The meetings happen twice a year. Usually the IRS then invites to the meeting IRS counsel, collection, examination, ACS representative, taxpayer advocate service representative. I think those are main people who are showing up. Oh, and criminal investigation agents. That would be, I would say, the best place to ask any questions. Usually the meetings happen July and January. If you send me an email, I will share with you the information of the person who organizes these meetings. And I believe, so she's like as a liaison, I believe if you have any questions, you can actually send an email to her and she can help you out to get in touch with a person at the IRS to discuss whatever question you have. Not sure, never tried that, but I think it would be a good try. So yeah, shoot me an email and I will send you the contact information for the person who basically puts you on the mailing list, because they just send out the information when the meeting will take place. And right now it's online. I don't know any other. I know they have webinars. Some of them are pretty good, and you just can find them on irs.gov, but don't know extension to any other kind of, conferences or anything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do you have any? Have you found that there was a particular best time in which to reach out to the number when you're dialing? Have you had any success in getting through?
Yes. So I've noticed if I call early morning, that's the easiest way. Before it was lunchtime, but it's truly dead. And then after 5 p.m. Now, the only problem with after 5 p.m., I believe they assign new teams, and sometimes it's just difficult to resolve anything with them. So, it's all anecdotal. It's based on my experience, but I would say early morning or after 5 p.m.
So do you think that with the recent, of course, being in the midst of what we are, and individuals working from home or recent retirements and not having the turnaround right away to be able to get individuals to respond, I guess with the hiring is being delayed because, as we know, with government, there's a lot of red tape, so it just takes forever. But do you see any indication that they are? I think you kind of mentioned it, that they were increasing their numbers, but yet it just still seems like it's just taking so long. Because, like you said, when you get these notifications of from them, it seems to be very delayed and lapsed, and next thing you know, you're already have received the notice that you are being assessed a dollar amount, and you're still trying to get a hold of somebody.
I think that it will improve, particularly in collection. And the reason for that, I think, first of all, IRS confirmed that they hired more people. They just need to go through training. So yes, it will take a few months. And second, I've noticed IRS improved its collection. When I'm saying improved, they picked up on some of the cases that IRS didn't do any contact for years. I think there is a big improvement on IT side, like for the system to figure out what cases were dormant. And I think third issue is that if I believe Biden in one of their, I don't remember either it was presentation but in his speeches, but basically he stated clearly that now it needs to be focused on the collection of all the tax debt. So I think that's another reason for a push, I think, by IRS to get more people into working the cases. So I think we will see a big increase, particularly in collection cases. Examination, not sure, because it requires more training. But collection, I think we'll see more and more notices and levies and contacts from IRS.
Hi, Olena. When you chatted back the website to petition with the tax court, did that go out to everyone? Because I'm not seeing it, so I'm not sure if everyone can see it.
Oh, I see. Okay, hold on, everyone. What about now?
Yes, now I can see it, so I'm
Okay.
assuming everyone else can too. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And I think, yeah, there's no more questions. So. All right. I think then, again, if you have any questions, feel free to call me or email. But I appreciate for being here. And hopefully it was useful.
Tax Forward definitely thanks you for doing this and for being here. We definitely appreciate it.
It's very informative. It's good to see some changes are coming about, some new changes, but it just, I guess it would be better if we can get more, technically, if the IRS has become more technical, you know, we'll be able to have access online and be able to get communication instead of just by phone. There's got to be more than one way to communicate, other than snail mail and waiting for someone to answer the phone.
That's my dream.
They're behind the technology of the rest of the world, it seems.
Yeah, at least they make some steps, so I think it's a good sign. And to be honest, I appreciate in a way COVID. I know it's bad to say, but I don't think we would see so many improvements if not for pandemic. So there's some, you always need to look at positive, right?
Yes, definitely. We need to find the positive in everything. You know what? I thought it's so. Is there no longer a deferment on collections for individuals anymore? Did that did elapse, right? They didn't have, nothing else has come out in regards to delay, because I know like for student loans that was pushed back, but the collections are still now actively going forward now. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. The Rhino holds, and I don't know, I just personally think that, you know, after all the payouts on, you know, because of the COVID and payments to individuals and businesses, it's definitely the IRS goal now will be just to collect. So they've been talking about hiring new people for a long time, even before COVID. So hopefully they would have more people, you know, being trained during COVID and pandemic and all the shutdowns. So hopefully at least we'll have more people to resolve the issues. It will be slow though, so, but they're catching up.